Okay.
Um, Alàgbà Dele Ogun, you have 20 minutes from now. If you wish to extend, do let me know. Over to you.
Erilu, thank you very much for this opportunity and for bringing us together once more. I haven't prepared a formal paper, but there are some points that I want to speak to. Um, and under the overriding theme of the need for us, the Yoruba peoples, to refresh our knowledge. Our knowledge is stale. Our knowledge is very, very stale. We need to refresh our knowledge, our understanding of the events that have brought us to where we are, so that we can chart a new way forward. Because history is never static. There's always new information that is emerging from time to time. How current is our understanding? One of the speakers mentioned the Kiriji War. That, of course, was the beginning of the deconstruction of the Yoruba nation. And the narrative that many of us are still carrying around is the narrative that was sold to us by those who had a strategic interest in breaking up the Yoruba nation. Because without breaking up that nation, Nigeria as is would not have been possible. It was a project of deconstruction. And the narrative that was sold to us is that we were always fighting ourselves. But think about it. It's the same narrative that they sold to us and to the rest of the world in the context of the slave trade, that we were selling ourselves. We need to stand back and think, where is this narrative coming from? Whose interest does it serve? When I read Samuel Johnson's History of the Yoruba, it became very obvious to me that all those conflicts and all those wars that culminated in the Kiriji War, 16-year-long civil war, it was very clear to me that this coincided with the beginning of the project, the British project for the construction of Nigeria. So if we stand back and think, was it just a coincidence that we were at war? The weapons, where were they coming from? Were we manufacturing the weapons? Or were we being supplied the weapons? Same thing happened during the slave trade. Who supplied the weaponry to enable whole villages, whole townships to be rounded up like sheep and sold into slavery? Without the imbalance of power that modern weaponry produces. Is it bows and arrows that they were using, the slave traders were using to round people up? Is it spears? Sometimes we have to stand back and think critically. Because if we do that, then we have a prospect of finding the way forward. The 16-year-long Civil War, when I read Samuel Johnson's book, I saw evidence of external hands that were supplying weapons to both sides to fast-track the deconstruction of that national identity. And then when everybody had fought themselves to a standstill, in fact, at one point, Alaafin sent an emissary to the British Prime Minister, begging them to intervene, to put a stop to this war. And the response that came back was, let them fight a little longer. We need to be applying the lessons of today that we see elsewhere around the world to understanding our past. The things that you see in Iraq, the things that you see in Iran, the things that you see in Libya, where weapons are being supplied to both sides, are these not lessons for us to reevaluate our journey and how we got to where we are? Because when we understand it, then we will begin to understand that there's much more unity amongst us than might at first appear. So it was 23rd of September 1886 that the British then stepped in and said, both sides, all sides in the Kiriji War, drop your weapons. And the peace treaty was signed, calling for peace, progress, and prosperity amongst the signatories and all their descendants. Now, what about the next piece of the narrative? I've dealt with the narrative that we were always killing ourselves, fighting ourselves like mad people. What about the related narrative, which is actually the opposite? The narrative that Yoruba are cowards and they don't fight. Now, can you see the contradiction immediately? Peoples who are at war, a 16-year-long civil war. By the time the Nigeria project begins, the narrative has become, Yorubas don't fight, they can't fight. What happened to that nation of warriors with all the experience of that war? It suddenly just disappeared? Or is somebody playing with our understanding of ourselves and our understanding of how we got to where we are? And despite all our nominal education, we swallow this narrative and begin to look at ourselves in a negative way. There was one in my study of the journey to date, which is reflected in my book, The History. Following the amalgamation of 1914, there was only one ethnic group that fought the British head on. That was the AGBA War, 1918. The AGBA and the OODUA in combination against the British to drive them out. It was that experience, and it was only because the First World War had ended that the British were able to send reinforcements. Otherwise, they were facing an American Revolution situation. It was that experience that convinced them to produce a report in 1921 on the shape of the army in Nigeria. And that report said the Yorubas would not make good fighting material. Well, you can understand now why we didn't make good fighting material, because we've just been fighting them to drive them out. And then, of course, you do not allow those who have the advantage of modern education, if you want to hold on to your colony, you do not teach them en masse how to use weaponry when they've already shown a propensity to rebel. So this was the genesis of the false narrative of cowardice amongst the Yoruba. Of all the ethnic groups, we actually had, as at the 1920s, the greatest military experience by virtue of that long century of war that led up to 1886. This is what I mean about the need for us to refresh our knowledge and to give our people the true understanding of how we got to where we are. But at the same time, there's the other side of the narrative, also false. We, the Yorubas, indulge in it a lot. A claim that we are exceptional, that only Yorubas behave this way. Only Yorubas will vote for an Igbo man in the 1951 elections. We deceive ourselves because we don't again understand what really was going on. NCNC was competing in the Western region because NCNC was a product of Azikwe's reverse takeover of Herbert Macaulay's control of political Lagos at that time. That's what gave NCNC a bridgehead into the Western region. We've heard from Harold Smith how the British rigged the 1956 elections in favor of NCNC and against Action Group in order to destabilize Action Group and to undermine Awolowo's control of the Western region base. It wasn't that the Yorubas were being exceptional in voting for an Igbo party, as it were. It was partly because we were the federal capital territory, so it's cosmopolitan. But more importantly, it was a product of behind-the-scenes electoral maneuvering by the British and Azikwe. So let's not deceive ourselves, because if the federal capital had been in Enugu, you'll get the same. Just as now the federal capital is in Abuja. It's not that the people of Abuja have suddenly become a different creature from what they were, or indeed from the rest of the North. Let's be realistic in all our assessments of how we got to where we are. Let me also touch on the rivalry between the Igbos and the Yoruba. My group, the Fatherland Group, organized an event on the 15th of January of this year. Igbo and Yoruba speaking with one voice. Why? Because we understood that the rivalry between the Igbos and the Yoruba is artificial. It was sponsored. If we claim to be educated and more educated than others, it is incumbent upon us to use that education to understand the reality of things. The British agenda was for the North to rule. How were they going to achieve that? Except to divide the South. And what is the easier point of division? It's obviously between
Can you please mute yourself?
To divide the Igbos and the Yorubas whilst building unity right across the northern region. And then we say, oh, the North is so much more united, and we, the South, we're so divided. We just need to switch our brains on to understand what the agenda was. Nigeria was not made by us. The shape of Nigeria is as it was designed by the architects, and the architects, the British architects. So we were played since 1st of April 1939, April Fool's Day, and yet we continue to play the role of the fool despite all the qualifications that we have. This is what I mean, that we have to refresh our knowledge. We have to reset it. Understand that there was a conspiracy against the Yoruba in particular, but the South in general. It was against the Yoruba in particular because we got the boost in education ahead of everybody else. Not because we are cleverer than anybody else. Again, let's not deceive ourselves. Not that we're brighter, more intelligent. Every ethnic group has their own quota of the intelligent and the stupid. It is opportunity that determines the predomination of one as against the other. We had the opportunity because the colonial push in the South came from the Abeokuta area. That's why all the presidents, all the Yorubas who have been near the summit, either presidents or near the presidents, have been AGBA people. It's not that the AGBA are brighter than the rest of the Yoruba peoples. It's the accidents of the first contact and the first kiss, if you like.
Okay.
Let me also touch on this issue of the Constitution. Again, I ask you for us all to reset our understanding. If anything comes out of this gathering, it should be a commitment to unlearn, to use the favorite expression of a colleague of mine in the Yoruba, in the Fatherland Group. Unlearn what we have learned in order to learn what we need to learn to survive. The mere fact that a document is called a constitution does not make it a constitution. It is a legal document, and the lawyers will give it whatever name. A constitution is made by the people who are to be governed by that instrument. It is made by them and for them. The mere fact to give it, you christen it a constitution does not make it so. Those are but rules of governance. Every gathering of human beings of any number will have rules of conduct. A constitution is a fundamentally different document. The so-called Constitutional Conference of 1950 was a fraud because you had an alien power, the British, who interfered with the constitutional deliberations. The same is true of the 1957 so-called Constitutional Conference. Again, you had an alien presence, the British again, interfering with the outcome of the deliberations. So therefore, the 1960 Constitution, in inverted commas, was not really an expression of the will of the people.
Thank you.
The 1979 one was a military imposition. The 1999 one is similarly just a legal document that has been given the name of a constitution, but in reality, it is not. Finally, the way forward for the Yoruba peoples. We must have our own internal constitutional settlement. We must have internal organization. With internal organization, we have internal coherence. And it's only with internal coherence and organization that you can face the outside world. If I get the opportunity to add further comments, I will later on, but I thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm still going to put the question to you. The ongoing agitation for self-determination, based on the experiences you have shared, on average, how long is anybody in a position to state how long it's going to take for Yoruba nation to just, for Yoruba people to just wake up and we are Yoruba nation? Over to you. If you can't, let me go to Alàgbà Dele Ogun. Sorry, Professor. Alàgbà Dele Ogun, 5 minutes. How long? You're going to wake up and it's Yoruba nation.
Well, the answer is that it depends.
Thank you.
it depends on us, and it depends on them, because these things are products of not just plans, but events. What is clear, when you look at other countries, if you look at Scotland, they've been agitating for independence almost since the beginning of the Union. In fact, since the beginning of the Union, there were always two voices within Scotland: the ones who wanted to stay within Britain and the ones who wanted to be a standalone nation. As it is for Scotland, so it is for the Yoruba nation. There are those who want to remain within Nigeria, and there are those who want to leave Nigeria. The balance depends on the events going on around. What is clear is that Scotland has been, or the Scottish nationalists have been kept in because the Union was successful. The British Union was successful. The more successful the Union, the less likely, it's just like marriage, the less likely somebody wants to leave. But where you have an unproductive union, such as we have in Nigeria, that is wasting the potential of every single one of us, even the ones who think that they're benefiting, except the low life who had no prospects but for Nigeria. Some of them, it is Nigeria that's made them relevant. But for Nigeria, there will be nobodies. And so, of course, they're going to hang on for dear life. But the evidence of failure is all around us. And as the failure accelerates, so that we move nearer the point of exit, what is there to persuade people to stay? It is not AK-47s that will persuade people to stay. There does come a point when people say, I really don't care. Enough is enough. We're out of here. So the answer to your question, how long?
Yes.
Is that nobody has a crystal ball. But the process has begun. It is the decay of Nigeria that has given birth to all the nations and the voices of all the nationalists. And I cannot see the failure of Nigeria reversing itself. I can't.
Okay, thank you. On that note, thank you, Alàgbà Dele Ogun. Nobody knows. Alàgbà Dele Ogun, over to you.
Oh, okay, sorry, my apologies. Let me be brief. Let me touch on the point about the parliamentarians and their relevance. They are irrelevant to the issues, or their opinion is only as valid as the opinion of any one of us. They went into office as flag bearers for a political party, not for a nation. So having gone in as flag bearers for APC or PDP or whatever party they went in, the platform on which they stand is their party platform, not on a national platform. The national issues are for the nation and for the peoples to determine. I go back to the point that I made at the beginning. We must refresh our understanding of the issues. We're still stuck in the narrative that was sold to us, which facilitated our imprisonment and exploitation in the first instance. And many of us are still running with that old narrative. It is incumbent upon us to update our knowledge by direct reading or by discussions such as this, so that we do not keep going around in circles. Finally, we must build alliances, and we will not build alliances by using derogatory language in respect of other ethnic groups who are also feeling the same oppression. We must change our language. the language that denigrates other ethnic groups and falsely assumes that we are somehow an exceptional people. We must eschew that. We must change. It's only by joining hands with other ethnic groups in the same situation that we will get out of this hole. Thanks very much. Well, you have to understand the reality of the International Criminal Courts. It is first and foremost a political organization and not so much a juristic organization. It really does depend on the politics that shapes their actions. As regards the traditional rulers, it is, I'm afraid for them, office carries responsibility. And it is for them to rise to their responsibility. Otherwise, the people have every right to say that they are not representing their interests, and traditional rulers have to decide on whose side they wish to stand, either with their people or against their people. But my central point in relation to the traditional rulers is that it is not solely a matter of privileges and indulgences. It is also a matter of responsibility. And if they want to enjoy the privileges of the office, they must rise to the responsibilities of that office. The two go together. On all issues, there's always more than one opinion. There are those who want to participate. They will make their own decisions. There are those who do not wish to participate. They will make their own decision. No one group, the participation group, cannot speak for the boycott group. The boycott group cannot speak for the participate group. It is a matter of trying to persuade one another as to what is the right course. So in the same way as no one can stand up and say that the Yorubas are going to boycott the elections, equally, no one can say that the Yorubas are going to participate in that election. My own position is that it's in the interest of the Yoruba nation to boycott the charade of the elections. And if we can stand together behind that position, you send a more powerful signal than lending your legitimacy to an illegitimacy. They need you to roll out and line up like turkeys and vote for Christmas once more. It's time to say we're not doing that any longer.